Okay, so this is the 2025 tax budget hearings recap. I was asked to kind of compile everything that had been submitted by all the departments and do a recap. This is not the tax budget presentation for adoption of the tax budget. This is just to take a look at what was submitted by the departments and take a look at some of the big differences between the adopted that we had for this year and then what we're looking at for next year. So just to kind of look at all the funds, all the revenue and expense. This is not just the general fund, not just commissioners' accounts or any particular one, but this is for all the departments and all the funds, all the revenue and all the expenses. So for those that can't see, because we don't have this monitor up, the blue line is the revenue and the red line is the expenses. So you can see budgeted for 2024 and proposed for 2025, the expenses exceed the revenues. This is not unusual. There is a significant portion of the county's budget that goes into resources, which would be in basically the revenue. This just counts the actual revenue that we're going to be receiving during the year. It does not include any carryover cash from the previous year that gets added to the revenue that we're expected to get in the current year. So this would not be unusual to see for the budgeted 2024 and the proposed 2025. So this next one is actually just the general fund. Again, the blue line is the revenue, the red line are the expenses. As you can see from both of these, we've had a fairly steady increase in revenue. Expenses have kept pace too. You see some of these years where, like 2019, 2021, where expenses exceeded revenue. Those were times when we were beginning to prepare for not only building this building, but also for the courthouse expansion, setting money aside for both those projects from our surplus that we had. So looking at what we're looking at for next year for revenue, and again, let me reiterate, none of this is set in stone yet at all. This is just what has been submitted, what what all the departments submitted for the general fund revenue. So the commissioners, we set the revenue budgets for the sales tax as well as the cost allocation. Revenue requests for 2025 have gone up versus this year's adopted budget, close to $3.7 million, mostly from the property tax and the state reimbursement for real estate. Between both of those, that was another $2.5 million. In addition, there is an extra $500,000 that we have budgeted for the sales tax, so that's at $21.5 million. And there's also another $700,000 in prisoner housing, which has been a lot more active revenue than it has the last several years. So I also wanted, and unfortunately, this monitor is not working over here, but I wanted to, before we start getting into the expenses, I wanted to just kind of show people what we look at for what we call our fund summary report. And this is the fund summary for the general fund. So at the beginning of the year, we carried over about $11.7 million. And that's what you see at the top there is the beginning balance. We generally don't have any outstanding warrants that get accounted for here. So then you have your carryover encumbrances, which is the fourth line down there, and that's about almost $3.2 million. So that gets taken off of the amount of the beginning balance, and then you end up with what is considered the January 1 unencumbered cash. And that was about 8.55 million, just a little over that. The year-to-date, and all this was current as of yesterday, so the year-to-date revenue was about 23 million. Year-to-date expenses were about 19.5 million. So we're doing good as far as, you know, keeping our expenses under what we're making. That was a subtotal of an additional about $3.5 million, which added to the beginning cash gives us a current balance in the general fund of about 15.2 million. Now, the bottom part of this, at the bottom there is the calendar year certified revenue. Currently in the, and I'm having trouble seeing this here, is about 46 million. I believe that's what that figure says. When you add this, so we're planning on getting 46 million during the year in 2024. But you add the 8.55 million of the January 1 unencumbered cash, and that gives you your total resources, which is a little over $54 million. So that's what the figure is that we have to work with throughout the year. That's why some of those years where the expense went over the calendar year revenue, we were able to still function because we're spending a little bit of that extra cash that we had. So with the 54 million in total certifications, we currently have current year appropriations of about 50 million. So that gives us a total unappropriated balance of about 4.6 million. And that, when I do the tax budget, that is what essentially becomes the beginning balance that I go through when I do the presentation of the tax budget. So, and when I do the carryover tables during the tax budget hearing for the public when we're presenting the budget, that's the amount that we're making plus what we're saying we're going to carry over as an unappropriated or available cash balance, that all gets added together. So I also wanted to look at some of the cash balances too, and unfortunately I apologize again that this monitor is not working here. So looking at what the cash is that various departments have input into or control over. So I'm not going to say that this is every cash, you know, every account that has cash in it. There may be some, but from the general fund all the way through the health department, which I think was Fund 6042, that is all the cash. So now I took the general fund out. That's the second figure down. That has, and these were all figures that were current basically as of Friday, because the database that I refresh these from is usually a day behind what is actually happening. So so the cash balance is a little bit different there from the fund summary screen that I showed you. So the commissioners, as a total, have about $35 million that technically they are kind of have oversight over, direct oversight. The general fund is in a similar light, but that also has a lot of different departments in it that have a say and a stake in what that money does. JFS, you're looking at about 13.7 million. Metzenbaum, the DD there, about 11.9 or about 12 million. Mental health, 6.3. Engineer, 6.1. Auditor, 5.1. Solid waste, 4.3, and on down there. So now I wanted to take a little breakdown look at the money that the commissioners have input into. Again, I apologize for the small print. In that 34 million, almost 35 million, almost half of it is the American Rescue Plan, which is about 17.2 million. That's the second figure down from the top. Then you have things like airport construction, that's the top one, about 380 million. Building improvements, about, what did I say, million?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. 380,000. Building improvements is about 4.1, 4.2. Just some of the major ones here. We have 2 capital reserve funds. The phase 1 has about $1 million left in it. That's the, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like the 6th number down. The capital reserve fund, that is what built this building. So we've got about $1 million right now left over from the building of this building. The capital reserve fund phase 2 has about 9.2 million in it. County home permanent improvements, about $3,500. Obviously, we don't have a county home anymore. So there are a number of funds, too, that I've been looking at and identifying that we don't use anymore or don't have a need for, with a little bit of cash left in them, that I'm going to try and get closed out and send that money back to where it came from. Courthouse construction, that's about 56,000. EMA, garage, storage, EPA, water pollution. So a lot of these are fairly small amounts. The Monsanto Settlement Fund has about 17,000. The Opioid Settlement Fund, which we just talked about today, has almost 300. The Senior Center Construction Fund has about 2 million. We have a sick and vacation accrual account, which was intended to help pay for large sick time payouts at one time, although we haven't transferred out of that or put into it in at least as long as I've been here. So, and then youth center improvements has about $136,000 in it. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, if you take out all of the capital improvement funds that are in here out of that almost 35 million, so things like airport construction, the American Rescue Plan, the Building Improvements Fund, both capital reserve funds, all these, when you take all those out, which are going to be spent here fairly soon, so at least over the next several years, when you take all those out, you end up with about $821,000, which are non-capital reserve or non-capital funds that the commissioners have direct input into, so, or direct control over. So now we're going to get into some of the general fund expense requests. So these are mainly going to be the departments that appeared before the commissioners and had meetings with the commissioners about their budgets. So the first 2 here, and I went in alphabetical order, so that's ADP and the auditor. So these expenses are broken down by the account categories. So in the 500, that's personal services. So that's like salaries, that's Medicare, that's OPERS, that's hospitalization, everything that is a 500 level account, basically all the payroll accounts. 600 are all the contract services, 700 are all materials and supplies, 800 is capital outlay, and then 900 is other expenses. So it's important to remember in this one, looking at the personal services, that ADP this year did assimilate the archives department, which had a total budget of about $320,000, and $300,000 of that was related to personal services. So when you're looking at the 2024 amended and also the 2025 tax budget, you got to take that into consideration in those numbers. And then the auditor's numbers are there as well for all those categories. And that's what that looks like on a graph. So the big jump, obviously, part of the reasoning behind it and for it was the assimilation of the archives department. And the blue line is ADP and the red line is auditor. The next ones here are the Board of Elections and the Commissioner's miscellaneous accounts. The Commissioner's miscellaneous contract services, which is the one of the larger ones here, includes things like the youth center and the joint juvenile detention center, which are probably going to, at least the joint juvenile detention center, if we're able to pull that out of the budget, that will greatly reduce that number. Also, the other expenses that are in there for the Commissioner's miscellaneous include things like transfers to court technology, to the Sheriff's 911 and 800 communications funds, community development, the airport, and also the computer equipment improvements fund. Other also represents capital transfers to various construction, to funds outside the general fund to fund various construction projects, including the new county office building and the courthouse, like I was explaining there when we were looking at the graph for the general fund. So that's the Board of Elections and BOCC miscellaneous, and that's what that kind of looks like on a graph. So the next ones are the building department and the commissioners. The commissioners' other expense is from which is the one thing that you'll notice when you look at it, increased greatly over the 2020 to 2021 and 2022 period. That was a change required by the state auditor, which changed the way the sales tax collection charges were levied to the county. They went from allowing us to deposit the payments as a net amount with the state and county fees already removed to a gross deposit that we then had to remove the charges in an expense account. 2021 was the year when that kind of went into effect, so that's a partial year. The first full year of doing that was 2022. So that expense basically goes up as the amount that we collect for the sales tax goes up. And then the building department there as well. And one thing you're going to see on this graph is the commissioners took action earlier this year to dissolve the Department of Development. And so both the building department and community development are going back to their original sub-accounts in the budget. So they'll no longer be together under Department of Development, but individually. So you're going to see one go down and one go back up in the graph. So that's the green is the Department of Development, the blue is the building department. So you can kind of follow the green line over to the blue dot in 2025 there. So, and then the red is the commissioners. So the next one that we have is the courts and the coroner. Again, I want to reiterate that we do not receive a budget from juvenile probate court. I have managed to get them to send me their revenue requests, because when I would get the revenue and the expenses, with the revenue now having been certified to the state, I can't change the revenue numbers, so typically they had expenses that would have exceeded their revenue and available resources, so we would have to then do revenue certifications and supplementals and all that. So she did at least send me their revenue numbers, so when I get the expenses, it eliminates having to do that. So the courts, there's increases in their budgets here for next year, and also in the coroner had a staff member go from part-time to full-time, and they're paying increased fees for autopsies, which are performed by Geauga County. The courts, common police court's going to have a new judge next year, and there's some overlapping positions there as well for them, and they have some retirements too that they're going to be covering for next year as well. And that's what that looks like on a graph. So blue line's common pleas court, red line's coroner. So the next one here is maintenance and the prosecutor's office. Obviously, maintenance has been struggling with staffing issues and still having the 470 offices and also inflationary cost increases. So a lot of their requests here have been going up. Obviously, the commissioners also improved some wage adjustments for them as well in order to make the payment of the jobs a little more competitive. So being able to attract applicants. Now the prosecutor's office has gone up obviously due to the assimilation of municipal prosecutions. So, and that is reflected in both the 2024 amended, because we did give them extra appropriations this year, and then the 2025 tax budget request reflected a full year of doing the municipal prosecutions. So. And that's what that looks like on a graph. So the blue line is maintenance, the red line is prosecutor. And there's been, you know, I gotta say too, although that looks pretty steep, the gradation over on the left side is a lot smaller. There has been renewed effort with maintenance to try and, with the money that we've set aside in building improvements and stuff, in order to try and do more projects, get things completed and through the department quicker. So they've made some pretty good hires on the project management side. So, you know, a lot of these things are getting done as opposed to sitting on the back burners. Okay, and here is the public defender and the sheriff. So nothing really particularly remarkable about these. Obviously, the capital outlay for the sheriff. And the sheriff is one of our largest budgets. But there has been kind of a lot of equipment that they've had issues and trouble getting. So when you're looking at the 2024 amended budget there for capital outlay, that's a lot of carryovers of previous purchase orders that were not able to be fulfilled in 2023, that they carried over to 2024. And then, you know, all their budget requests for next year as well. And on the public defender side too, you know, by, I think it's Ohio Administrative Code or the ORC, I'm not sure which one, but there have been some opinions that the public defender, the wages and stuff, not only for the public defender, but his staff have to maintain some sort of parity with the prosecutor's office. So as the prosecutor's wage goes up through the ORC, we've been keeping pace with that with him. And we also get that reimbursed. It was 85%. I think it's gone down.
I think it went up this year.
Well, it's at 85, but I think we just got the, Jerry, did you see that too?
I didn't look at it.
Okay. I think it did actually go down for next year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not a lot. I mean, we still get reimbursed, but it is going down.
Okay.
Yeah, 5–10% possibly. So that's what that looks like on a graph. And then you got the treasurer and the veterans. The treasurer has had some things as far as their contract services have gone up due to the increased fees that we've been paying to Red Tree.
Not much, so.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. I mean, when you look at the overall numbers, his budget's been pretty consistent. And then the veterans as well. A couple of those capital outlays in 2022, they bought a new van, a handicap accessible van. And then last year, I believe they bought a copier or two, multifunction device, so that's what those were. So now we're going to get into, that's what it looks like on the graph. Now we're going to get into, and again, sorry for the small print, the general fund payroll requests. So we're going to look at year over year from the 2024 budget to the 2025 request. So this is amended budget numbers for 2024 and what the budget request was. So when you look at the lines highlighted in yellow, these were the largest increases, not necessarily from a percentage level, but from a dollar perspective. So ADP had a 19.85 request over their 2024 amended budget. So their amended budget, which includes the amount that was transferred to them for the archives payroll, their 2025 tax budget request was 1.45 million. So that was an increase of 19.85%. Common Pleas Court, as I indicated before, they went up about 16% over their 2024 amended budget in their 2025 tax budget request. So their current amended budget is about 1.3 million, and their 2025 tax budget request was 1.5. As I said, they're getting a new judge next year, and there's some positions that are going to be overlapping there for various reasons, including retirement. Maintenance was probably the largest increase. They are at almost 30% more than what their 2024 amended budget was. So you're looking at about 1.15 million in their 2024 amended budget versus a 2025 tax budget request of almost 1.5 million. Now that does include, and also ADP has this too, does include some vacant positions. Some vacant positions that may or may not be currently advertised for. And also maintenance does include a line on their personnel schedule for overtime in order to provide extra appropriations for overtime payments, because a vast majority of their employees are overtime eligible. And then the prosecutor's office, theirs went up about 12.1%. And obviously, as I stated earlier, that is primarily due to the fact that they've taken over municipal prosecutions. So the sheriff, which is probably the largest payroll budget, their budget for payroll only went up 3.37%. So, and they do have some vacant positions as well. And considering the size of their budget and the fact that they have a union as well, and I think their union wages, if I'm not mistaken, are at 3% for 2025. So that is the general fund payroll requests. So another thing too is contract requests. One of the things that we're looking at going into next year was what all the contract requests were from the departments. Many departments, not all, provided a good list of the contract services that they get. Some of the ones that had sizable increases here, and the ones that I didn't highlight and don't have the amounts either stayed the same or went down. So ADP had a $62,000 increase in their contract services request over 2024. Now this is, I just want to make sure I point this out. I'm going from the adopted budget now, whereas with the payroll I went from the amended budget. I did go to the adopted budget now. So this would be what we started the year out this year versus what was requested for next year. So ADP was 62,000 more. The auditor was almost 70,000, $69,011. The coroner it requested 21,000 more in their contract requests. As I stated earlier too, all their autopsies are done by Geauga County. So when their charges go up, what they pay obviously goes up. So that's part of the reason for that. Maintenance, their contract services request went up 330,000, and that's about a 44% increase. The sheriff's department went up about 95,000, 17.29, and this is just in the general fund. I want to point that out. And the treasurer went up 6,000. And for this one too, I have included the funds that are outside the general fund that get pretty much all of their operating money from the general fund. So when you're looking at these, any increases in their budget which necessitate an increase in transfers in revenue also translates into an increase in expenses for the general fund, because they have to increase a transfers out account in order to cover that. So when we're talking about increases in things like court technology, the sheriff's 911 and 800 communications fund, also community development, and also the computer equipment improvements fund, any increases in those requests translate directly into an increase in expenses for the general fund. So the court technology fund, theirs only went up $600, so less than 0.5%. The 911 program went up $73,492. The 800 communications fund went up about 24,500. Community development went down, and the computer equipment improvements fund, their contract services went up 38,000, and that was about a 7.84% increase. Okay, and then next are the equipment requests. So for a long time, and every time the departments get their budget, all the 800 level accounts, which are all the equipment accounts, all the equipment accounts get zeroed out. And whenever I include those amounts, I have to put in individual transactions. So the departments have a sheet for their equipment to put down any equipment that they need, how much it is, how many of them they need, and stuff like that. So now with this, I have again, the 2024 adopted budget. So you can see equipment requests here from ADP, the auditor, Board of Elections, the building department. And these are all the ones where the ones are highlighted where the amount went up from the previous year. and that there are actual requests instead of them being zero. So the engineer, maintenance, the public defender, the sheriff, and this one has not only equipment but also vehicles. That's what the 803 is. So I believe that was for 6 vehicles that you guys were requesting for 2025. And Common Police Court and Court Technology, the 911 program, 800 Communications Fund, and also the Computer Equipment Improvements Fund. So what was adopted in 2024 was about $405,000. What is being requested in equipment and vehicles for 2025 is about $1.75 million. So it's about 1.3 or so million more than what was adopted in the 2024 budget. So as we're looking at this, I want to harken back to when I went over the fund summary screen. So when I'm looking at this, you know, we have about a $2.4 million deficit, but I want everyone to understand that that is just for the calendar year revenue. So the 47 million there just is what revenue we expect to get in 2025. That does not include like the 8 to 10 million of unencumbered cash that would get added to that. So when I say deficit, I'm not saying that the general fund couldn't handle that $2.4 million shortfall. In fact, I can pretty much say with a lot of certainty that it would be able to handle that with no problem. But when you look at what the trends are and what your future prospects are for continued increases in revenue, one has to wonder how long we would be able to continue, you know, these steep increases in expenses in some areas. So to look at the 3 areas that I went over, which were payroll, contracts, and equipment, I mean, there are areas potentially that we could reduce budgets and actually have a remaining balance left over as opposed to a $2.4 million deficit. And like I said, all this stuff is still fluid. We don't have to have the budget to the auditor's office until the end of the month. Our hearing to the public on the next budget is right now scheduled for July 2nd. So I'm open to suggestions from the commissioners as to what you'd like to do, if anything, or if you want to just let it go as is and you know, keep an eye on things as we go through this year to make sure that our revenue isn't falling off in any area. I know month before last, which was April, we did have about $117,000 decrease year over year, I believe, in the sales tax. So that was an alarming thing to see, although that's the only time that it's gone down. And as I think I said in the financial flash that I sent you guys for that month, you know, we had the second highest April of all time. Unfortunately, it was second to the highest one, which happened last year. So it's not cause for panic. So it's just something that we need to keep an eye on. And every other one so far this year has been higher than the previous year. So I also, and this is been part of the tax budget presentation as well for the last couple years. Just kind of going over some of those cash balances that we were talking about. The 2.8 million currently in the Department on Aging's accounts, that is levy funding. Funds have to be used for senior services. Aging will be utilizing some of this money to help build the new Chardon Senior Center, which they have transferred money into the Senior Center Construction Fund, which is that second one there. This includes money from the sale of the previous senior center, along with funds transferred from the department. Currently in the process of acquiring property in Chardon Township, and the balance of the funds will be, and that's like $750,000. The balance of the funds will be used for renovations of the building and property. The 17.2 in the American Rescue Plan Fund, 10 million is intended to be used as a standard allowance, which we would like to use for the courthouse project. 5 million for the McFarland wastewater treatment plant improvements, 1 million for the Aquila wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation, 200,000 reimbursement to the Department on Aging for pandemic-related expenses, and 1 million is currently unallocated, may be used for a variety of other projects. We have 4.2 right now in the Building Improvements Fund. Will be used to improve various county buildings. Multiple projects are currently in various phases of completion. The most current 5-year plan that I have for maintenance includes roughly $6 million worth of projects. So that we will continue to try and set money aside into that fund in order to do these projects. And I don't even think that, from what I'm looking, this doesn't include the ceiling or the roof on the safety center. So
excuse me, was that does include or does not?
Does not. Does not.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also, we have a balance of both the Phase 1 and the Phase 2 capital reserve funds of 10.2 million. Obviously, this building is, I don't think it could get any more complete without actually being called complete, but this one is in the final stages of completion. $1 million will likely be transitioned to debt retirement for this building and the Phase 2 courthouse expansion, which is currently under construction. So some of the takeaways from the budget requests. We intend to stay vigilant regarding conservative budgeting. We do not want to jump ahead of ourselves regarding revenue and continue in a steep upward trajectory with expenses. Best way to maintain a level of control is to budget strictly for the necessities and consider increases at a later time once we know we have the resources, and spend what we need to and endeavor to put unneeded revenue back in the pockets of citizens.
Job easy.
Okay, are there any questions?